quilt maker who kept a house in the blue, misty mountains up high. She made the most beautiful quilts in the world, but she would not sell them. She said, "I give my quilts to those who are poor and homeless."
I give my quilts to those who are poor and homeless.
They're not for the rich.
They're not for the rich.
At this time, there also lived a very powerful and greedy king. He loved to receive presents so much that he celebrated his birthday twice a year. With all these treasures to enjoy, the king never smiled.
Somewhere there must be one beautiful thing that will finally make me happy.
Just then one of his soldiers said, "You don't have one of the quilt maker's quilts."
You don't have one of the quilt maker's quilts.
The king said,
I must have one.
So he and his soldiers marched up the mountain. And when they arrived, the king said, "I want one of your
I want one of those quilts."
The quilt maker only laughed. She said, "Make presents of everything you own,
Make presents of everything you own,
and then I'll make a quilt for you.
and then I'll make a quilt for you.
With each gift you give away,
With each gift you give away,
I'll sew in another piece.
I'll sew in another piece.
When all your things are gone,
When all your things are gone,
your quilt will be finished."
your quilt will be finished.
The king jumped up and down.
I can't give away all my wonderful treasures.
So he ordered his soldiers to take the woman,
Take her to the cave where the bear sleeps.
the soldiers grabbed the quilt maker and took her up the mountain and sat her down right in front of the cave of the sleeping bear. The king said, "There."
There! I'm sure the bear will make a very fine breakfast of you.
And he and the soldiers marched back to the palace. Later, the bear woke up, stood up on her hind legs, and roared. The quilt maker said, "No wonder you're so grouchy.
No wonder you're so grouchy. You only have rocks to sleep on.
Bring me some pine needles,
Bring me some pine needles,
and I'll make you a pillow
and I'll make you a pillow
with my shawl."
with my shawl.
Lay that down. The bear said, "No one has ever been so kind to me before.
No one has ever been so kind to me before.
Would you please stay the night?" The quilt maker said, "Yes."
Yes.
Now the king was greedy, but he was not mean.
Oh my, what have I done?
So he woke up his soldiers
Wake up!
and he said, "Come on, we're marching to the cave."
Come on.
They marched to the cave, but when they arrived, they saw the quilt maker and the bear having a breakfast of berries and honey. This angered the king so much, he said to his soldiers,
I order you to take her to the smallest island you can find.
So the soldiers grabbed the quilt maker. The bear ran back into her cave. Bear.
Hi, Bear.
And they took her over to the island where she had to stand on her tiptoes. The king said, You must
stay here until you agree to make me a quilt.
Then he and his soldiers left. The quilt maker saw a sparrow flying across the great lake. A cold wind was blowing, and it didn't look like the poor little bird would make it to shore. She called the bird over and said, Rest here.
Best team.
Then she made the bird a beautiful golden coat. When the bird was warm, she flew off. But soon she was back. She lifted the woman off the island and carefully sat her in a tree. The king and his soldiers showed up. The king was furious. They saw the woman was sitting in a tree and sewing coats for the sparrows. The king said, I give up.
What must I do for you to make me a quilt?
The quilt maker said, give away all the things you own.
Give away all the things you own.
Give away all the things you own and also a quilt for you.
Give away all the things you own and also a quilt for you.
With each gift that you give, put another piece in your quilt.
I'll put another piece in your quilt.
The king jumped up and down.
I can't give away my wonderful, beautiful treasures.
The quilt maker said, if they don't make you happy.
If they don't make you happy, what good are they?
And so the king and his soldiers returned to the palace. And the quilt maker and the sparrow returned to her house. And soon the king began to give away things. First, it was just one or two things. But then he began to see how happy it made people. And he began to give away more and more. For years and years, the king traded his treasures for smiles all around the world. Piece by piece over at the quilt maker's, his quilt grew more and more beautiful. Quilt maker and Sarah. Once the king had given everything away, his eyes began to glitter with joy. And over at the quilt maker's, piece by piece, his quilt grew larger and larger.
Two more gifts.
Finally, the king had given everything away and he returned home. His royal clothes were in tatters, but he was so happy he smiled every day. And one day, the quilt maker and the sparrow came to the palace. The king stood up. He said, "What's this?" The king stood up. He said, "What's this?"
What's this?
The quilt maker said, "As I promised you long ago,
As I promised you long ago,
now that you're poor,
you
you may have a quilt."
may have a quilt.
"I'm not poor," said the king.
I'm not poor. My heart is filled with the happiness I have given. I'm the richest man I know, and now I have a gift for you.
And so from his throne room, from his throne room, he and his soldiers brought out his throne. He invited the quilt maker to sit down. He said, "It's really quite comfortable."
It's really quite comfortable, perfect for sewing.
From that day on, the king went to the quilt maker's house in the clouds every day. And by day, the quilt maker sewed the beautiful quilt she would not sell. And at night, the king took them down to town. There he searched out the poor and downhearted, never happier than when he was giving something away.
Woohoo! Woo!
Everybody together? Let's go.
Woo! Woohoo!
And that's our production of the Quilt Maker's Gift. Do you have any questions for them? Well, we want to thank you for coming. Bodhi's going to walk by with his treasure basket. And if you would mind putting your treasures that he gave you back in them, we'll appreciate it. Wait till they leave, okay? And my class, can you thank the audience for coming today?
You're welcome. We enjoyed it.
Thank you. So,
Now I'm rich once again.
you open the door so our guests can go. And then we will take our costumes off once our guests have left.